Some stories don't begin with fairy tales, they begin with charm that slowly turns into control, with promises that become threats, and with relationships that go from light to darkness before you even realize what's happening. Today on SpectraShowcase, we're sharing a deeply emotional and very real journey, one that's not about gossip, but about truth, courage, and the long road to healing. This is not just a story of pain, but of strength. So, let's walk through it together, with empathy, not judgment. They first crossed paths in a professional space, a press room at the Denver Broncos facility back in 2002, nothing more than two individuals on their separate paths. But fate works in strange ways. Their real connection happened later, at a local nightclub in Denver. Not planned, not arranged, just a chance meeting that sparked a conversation. From that night onward, he pursued her relentlessly. She resisted, at first, being a reporter. She had lines she didn't want to cross, especially mixing work with personal life, but over time, his charm wore her down. He was persistent, charismatic, and convincing, and she gave in. Their relationship lasted years, from those first encounters until everything unraveled in 2010. What triggered the end was far more than an argument. It was about control, deception, and ultimately, trauma. The turning point, a betrayal that stung deeply. He had moved one woman out of his home, only to move another in, without telling her. At the time, he had asked her to leave her husband. They weren't exclusive. She was juggling two relationships, but when someone asks you to commit, honesty is expected in return. For her, it was simple. Don't ask for loyalty if you're not offering it. He wasn't faithful, and she knew that. But what followed was not just heartbreak, it was the darkest moment in her life. The argument that day was different. Usually, they fought over the phone. Not in person, but this time, emotions boiled over. He became aggressive, forceful, physically intimidating. She made it clear, she didn't want intimacy. Not that day. Not after he'd been with someone else. She said no. More than once, she explained why, but that didn't matter to him. He refused to accept it. He forced her into acts against her will. First, coercion, then assault. And finally, rape. She remembers the struggle. She remembers being overpowered. And she remembers the moment he left, knowing what he'd done. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She closed the door behind him, in shock. At first, she wasn't going to report it. Why? Because fear changes everything. When you've known someone for years, when they know your life, your work, your vulnerabilities, it becomes terrifying to stand against them, especially when they start making threats. He threatened to ruin her reputation, to call in favors. He knew people, in media, in law enforcement, in powerful places, and he said he'd use them all to silence her. And that's when the real harassment began. He wouldn't stop calling her, wouldn't stop showing up at her workplace. He warned her that if she said a word, he'd destroy her. The threats turned physical. Strangers began appearing at her door. One even screamed at her through her apartment window while her child was present. Someone sat in her driveway while her daughter was home alone. That's when she decided to get a protective order. Enough was enough, but that didn't stop him. He retaliated. He doxed her, releasing her personal address publicly. And even after she dropped the case for her safety, the fear daughter didn't leave. It settled into her bones. She tried to move on. She went back to work, but peace didn't come easy. One day, while doing her regular job at Turner Broadcasting, uploading videos for CNN, she saw something chilling. He appeared on a segment, talking about domestic violence. The irony was unbearable. The co-host even suggested that one of the cases against him had simply been dropped by police, making it look like she had lied or disappeared, rather than withdrawn it herself out of fear. That moment triggered everything over again. It painted a false narrative, one that denied her experience, one that turned the workplace hostile and unbearable. When asked why she didn't file a police report immediately after the assault, her answer was one that resonates with many survivors of emotional trauma and domestic abuse. She was terrified. She knew he had connections. She feared retaliation. She didn't trust the system, not in Atlanta, where corruption runs deep. She was afraid that if she went to the police, one of his friends would answer the call, and she knew how often victims were dismissed or labeled as crazy. She admits now that her mindset wasn't stable, but not because of mental illness, because of trauma. because fear paralyzes, and because it's hard to process reality when you're still in survival mode. Years passed, she stayed mostly silent, but he didn't. He painted her as someone desperate for attention, someone trying to dig up the past, but she wasn't hiding. She had already taken legal action, she had been trying to heal. To the newest accuser stepping forward, she has only this to say: I'm praying for you. I've been there. I know exactly what you're going through. It's been 15 years, and the pain doesn't just vanish. But you're not alone. This story isn't about headlines or scandal, it's about survival, about the long journey of a woman reclaiming her truth, even when the world tries to silence her. If this story moved you, if you believe in giving survivors their voices back, please support SpectraShowcase by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring more real, honest, and impactful stories to light. Thank you for watching.